Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. Why don't you jump in the chat and tell me where you're coming from? I'm coming to you from sunny, actually, no, rainy Port Hope, Ontario. My name is Joel Vardy. I am CTO here at Agility and super excited today to be talking in this lunch and learn, even though it's pre-lunch. You can start eating your lunch. What's up with webhooks? Let's get into it. Yeah. Hey everyone, don't forget the chat. This is a live webinar. I am actually talking to you right now. If you see me in the chat, I am the host, Agility CMS. So if I type something, that's what it'll show up as. I encourage everyone to ask questions as we go through this. Webhooks can be confusing about what they actually do. So I want to tell you what webhooks do, what they don't do, and give you some examples of how I've used them and how we at Agility actually use webhooks ourselves. So let's dive right in. All right. So today we're going to talk about, webhooks 101. What do webhooks do? What are they? And then part two would be, what are webhooks in Agility? How does Agility implement webhooks for you? And we'll talk about what Agility doesn't do with webhooks. And then we'll give some examples. Okay, pretty straightforward agenda. Hopefully this works out, and hopefully this is really informative to the folks that are out there wondering kind of how can I leverage webhooks to help me out. So, what is a webhook? It's a trigger. So a webhook is something where it's actually going to do something. It's going to fire out a web request that allows you to initiate actions, and that web request is going to have a data payload. So it exists so you don't have to go and poll or make a bunch of calls to an API just to check to see if data has changed or if something has happened. All right. So webhooks were kind of invented after folks had written a lot of code that goes in and sort of pulls a system and saying, hey, have you done anything? Have you done anything? Have you done anything? And then a webhook will basically fire an event. So if you have things like push notifications or things like that, or the idea of a lot of this stuff happening where it's like you just get a pop-up on your screen saying, hey, this happened, webhooks could be the technology that's behind that. It's amazing how much of the internet and how much of stuff out there is still done by polling. And there's a lot of different ways to do polling in smart ways and whatnot. But webhooks kind of gets away from that and goes more to an event-driven model of the internet and the universe in general. So that's cool. And by the way, if you have questions anytime throughout this, please throw that into the chat, and I will keep an eye on that as I'm talking. I don't want to go too fast. We have half an hour for this, but if we go over, it's not the end of the world. And then hopefully we can connect after. Harmony, if you're listening, can you throw up the link in there to join our Slack channel? So we have a community Slack in Agility that I'm on all the time. My team is on, and the support team as well is on there all the time, monitoring stuff. So if you have questions that are outside of this webinar, then we can answer those in the chat. So that'd be great. It's basically agilitycms.com/join-slack. Okay, so webhooks in Agility, back to our content. So allows you to trigger actions when content changes in Agility. So anytime content is saved, published, deleted, or if it goes through the next phase of a workflow approval. So if someone requests approval or approves something or declines something, then you can trigger an action there, and we'll actually demonstrate that today. So publish events, you can do save events, and you can do workflow events. So there's three categories of webhooks. We don't have the ability to filter what that webhook gets sent. That's one of the things that's been requested, to filter it only if certain content changes on a certain list or in a certain sitemap or something like that. Don't have that ability at this point, but that is something that we've got in the hopper to look at in a future iteration. Okay. So this is what webhooks in Agility are. What they aren't, dear everyone, a webhook in Agility is not a form action from your website. Thanks. So if you're looking at taking user-generated content from your website and doing forms and stuff like that, yes, you can have webhooks that are involved in that. That would not be an Agility webhook. Okay, that would be, actually, I might show you today how we do that on our website. I'm going to show you how we do it actually on the new version of Agility that we just launched. So it'll give me an opportunity to actually show that. I'll show you how we implemented the feedback using an app, using Logic Apps in Azure. That, if we have a little bit of time at the end, I'll show that. but Agility does not do that for you, allow you to take form input from something. That's not what Agility does. Agility is a content service. Essentially, first and foremost, it's an API that allows you to get content from Agility and model it and do all those sorts of things. It does not allow you to take user-generated content from your website. However, it can help you set that up. All right, so that's a whole different set of things. We just did a webinar not too long ago with a company called FormStack. FormStack totally does that. Takes, allows you to have user-generated content forms on your site, and there's all kinds of different ways you can do that. Okay, so here we go. Here's a few examples of what you can do with webhooks in Agility specifically, and I have some examples of each one of these. First thing is you can trigger workflow. So you can have, actually, I don't have an example of this, but I can show you a little bit. So you could have basically something that gets triggered when someone requests approval on certain content list or something like that. And then if you have someone outside of Agility that you need to notify of that's happening, and maybe have them click something that then actually makes that approve, and they're not even an Agility user, you can totally do that with workflow webhooks. Okay. That isn't that common because most people that want to work with Agility content are Agility users and they can use Agility for that. But some organizations do have people that need to approve content, or they need to get notified of things that are changing with approval workflows, and you can use an approval webhook to do that. DevOps, this is a big one. This is one that really started to get popular with Jamstack technologies and folks building static websites. So this is the idea: is we want to trigger like a DevOps process or a build process for something like a website in our hosting infrastructure when content changes. And actually, the agilitycms.com website uses this. Our main website's hosted on Gatsby, or it's built with Gatsby, hosted in Netlify. But the build process for the incremental Gatsby build is triggered from a webhook. And I'll show you how that happens. And you can do task processing. So you can do automated processing outside of Agility, such as translating content. So I actually have an example of this in Zapier, where when content's changing, and it uses our Zapier plugin, so that you can actually get a webhook and register for that webhook without having to do anything. So our Zapier integration works really, really well for that. But the idea here is webhook's going to fire a process. You're going to respond to it with something, and then do some action. Another example here is on our documentation website, we use Algolia for the search. I'll show you how this works. And what we do is we fire a webhook that hits a serverless function inside our Next.js website. So our documentation site is on Next.js. And that actually adds that content into the Algolia index. So as you're publishing content in the documentation site, it's immediately available, or like within a second or two, available on the search for the site, which is really, really cool. Lots of different ways you can implement that, but this is just one of those ways. So pretty cool. If you have any other questions about how you can use webhooks, feel free to fire them up into the chat, and I will jump back to them. All right, that's the end of like the slideshow part of our presentation for today, folks. And now I'm going to get into actual showing stuff. Okay, and this could get interesting because I'm going to be showing a lot of different stuff. Okay, here we go. Let's see if I can share. I'm going to share just my Edge screen, my browser, and hopefully that will make it so you don't have too much on the screen, because I know that. All right, here we go. I know that sometimes, let's make this a little smaller so you can zoom in. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So I'm actually showing Agility, the classic Agility, since we have the new UI that I hope you can try out. By the way, has anyone tried out the new UI? And do you like it? And what do you think about it? If you don't want to put a comment in, you can actually just send us feedback. I would really appreciate that through the new UI's feedback thing. Okay, so I'm in the existing agilitycms.com website. Okay, so here's our actual sitemap, and you can see all kinds of stuff, in here for the current agilitycms.com page. So we use Agility for our own thing. Seems to make sense. Agility, this site is actually built using Gatsby. Okay, we redid this. It used to be actually hosted on ASP.NET. So this exact same pages and content model was actually an ASP.NET site. And then we took the same content model, rebuilt the front end using Gatsby. So that's a cool thing that you can do with Agility. You don't have to do a whole new version of your instance just to change your front end. But with that being said, we had to trigger our build somehow. We have to trigger Gatsby to say, hey, content has been changed. And so we need to let Gatsby know about that. Gatsby has the idea in here. This is our actual Gatsby setup. So we essentially, we set some configuration variables, but it has the ability, these are webhooks. So these are the webhook endpoints to trigger events inside Gatsby. So what we want to do is have Agility trigger our Gatsby builds. Okay. And this works for many, many DevOps processes, have the ability to sort of give you a webhook, an endpoint URL to go and trigger a build. You have the same things for like Vercel and Netlify and Azure DevOps, other things like that. So for our preview webhook, we want this one to be fired anytime content is saved, because then we have the ability to actually go and, Harmony or anyone else who's on our marketing team, hi Harmony, it's good to see you, can actually go and see what they can actually preview the website before they make any publishes. Okay. So where's that set up? We go into the settings of Agility, and under settings, there's one of these is called Webhooks. So go under settings, Webhooks. So let's click into there. And my whole browser just froze up. Okay, good. It's responding very, very slowly. I'm really slowly loading. Please go faster. There we go. All right. So here we go. So we have this site preview. All right. And you can see that I literally just copied and pasted, or actually it wasn't me, it was somebody else, copy and pasted that link from here into there. So now anytime anything is saved inside our website, it's going to trigger the preview to be updated. And it does a little incremental build thing and updates the preview, and it just works. Anytime we do publish, it fires this one. And if I was to compare, this one ends in like 07B, that's this one right here, the builds webhook. So we're going to trigger what's called an incremental build. Okay. So let's actually, she's not going to love this, but let's actually do this so we can see what happens. Okay. You can see that sometimes these preview updates, they take, 9 seconds. This one took 3 minutes because it was probably like the incremental build in Gatsby is actually really, really cool. It's smart enough to know like what needs to change. Let's go change something that's like teeny tiny. That's not a big deal, that Harmony won't notice that I'm messing around with our website. And I really shouldn't do this, but you know what? Let's do the 404 page, because that's not a huge problem. Okay, we're just gonna make one teeny little change to one teeny little thing on the 4 page. We're gonna take away the period at the end of the header. Okay, don't tell Harmony I'm doing this. Okay, I'm gonna do that. I saved it, and so you should see this sometimes takes a second to refresh, but that you can see right here, boom, we're now that webhook fired, and it's updating the preview on here. Okay, so this can happen really, really fast. And this preview will take, I don't know, a couple seconds, and it'll update that 11 seconds, and the preview's updated. So there's a slight delay behind it, but it actually works really, really well. You can see that someone else is updating stuff on here too. Okay. And in the, if we have like other stuff happening on the main build, this is like the actual builds that are happening. You can see these are like, 9 seconds, some of them are 30. Those are the requests from the main when someone actually clicks publish on there. Okay. I'm not going to click publish on the website right now, because anytime you do stuff like that during a live demo, bad things can happen. But that just shows you one way that we can trigger DevOps from Agility. Okay, pretty cool. Another one that I think is a really cool example is on our documentation site. So this is, here's our doc site. Here's our actual, this is the Agility docs right here. We actually have a webhook that's firing a request in a Vercel site. So as I was telling you, our documentation site's hosted on Vercel. It doesn't look like it because it's agilitycms.com/docs, which you would think, isn't that underneath the Gatsby site? We use actually Netlify to make them seem like they're all the same site. So lots of cool things you can do to make a site appear as a subfolder. But inside there's actually a serverless function called index article. Okay, so every Next.js site has the ability, if you are inside, this is inside the, here, I'll go back in a second. So this is the root of this site, okay? And it's an open source site, so you can go in and see this. And I can throw this in there if you want to go look at our code. There's our documentation site right there. There's the code for it, all right? If you go into pages, and this is a little bit more developer-y, but that's okay. Every Next.js site, you can actually run serverless functions if you put code in the API folder. So if you check in there, we've got this bunch of stuff that's happening, but if you look at the search folder, it has indexarticle.js. And you can see here, we are actually taking the reference name from the body of the payload that Agility sent to this thing, okay? So if you look at the documentation site here, this is what the JSON payload is going to look like, and it's got a reference name, okay? And so we're using that payload and parsing that apart a little bit to go and see what we want to do with that. And we, at this case, we only care about stuff that has article, I think the word article in the payload. Okay, if it ends with the word articles, then we want to process it. Otherwise, we don't care. And all that's going to do now is go and pull that content using GraphQL. So that uses the GraphQL version of our API, our GraphQL API, parses out, hey, what article just changed? What did you just do? And then we go and we save that into Algolia. We normalize it to the format that Algolia wants for its index. We shoot it into the index. So that means that, let's just go to the documentation site for a second. This is Joel doing one of his demos that he probably shouldn't do, but hey, let's go find a piece of documentation that might need a little update. Maybe it needs a grammar fix, and we'll see if we can fix the search. So if we're searching for, I don't know, pages and content, generate dynamic pages from content. Okay, so you can see we've got an article here with lots of cool stuff. And if we wanted to search like for this, dynamic pages, like this is, Algolia is really, really cool. It's like lickety split fast for finding stuff. Like the IntelliSense is just next level, right? So it's really, really fast to find things. If I was to make a change into this, I'd want that to be there really fast. Okay, I see that I'm starting to run low on time a little bit, so I want to leave time for questions. So I'm not going to actually go and change content and show this happening, but just trust me, it works really fast and it's awesome. It can get a little complicated if you're doing for search in particular. If you're not just searching content, I want to search like all of my entire page. You can use Algolia's crawler for that, and the crawler will automatically do stuff, but then you can trigger the crawler using a webhook if you want to like make it go faster, to immediately crawl a certain page when that page's content changes. That's a slightly different process, but you can still use a webhook to do that. Okay. And what's interesting is a webhook doesn't need to this index article.js, that endpoint gets called on every single time any piece of content gets changed. Okay. So as I was saying before, there's no filter inside Agility. When you register a webhook in here, anytime content gets published, any content, so that's pages, content, like any list, anywhere, any page, any module, you're gonna get notification. Okay, and you may get multiple notifications because sometimes when you save something or publish something, multiple things happen. Like when you publish a page, it publishes all the modules and the link content. So you're gonna get a boatload of events. You probably want to filter those events in the endpoint to say, hey, only if this happens. And sometimes you want to, like Gatsby's really good at this. It does it automatically. If you fire one event and there's something already happening, it will handle that. So you may, if you're processing webhooks, you may end up getting like a flood of webhooks. So you may want to have like an intermediary handler that then calls something. So in the case of Algolia, I probably don't want to trigger a new web crawl on every single possible request. I probably want to filter that out and say, was it a page or was it something like significant that changed, like an article, and then start a crawl. But I probably want to check to see if a crawl is happening first, and I can decide, hey, do I want to cancel that crawl? Do I want to start a new one? Whatever. So think of it as I want to process this and I want to be intelligent about what I'm going to do, because Agility webhooks are just a flood of change information that you're going to get. Okay. I have one more example that I want to talk through, which is a little more complex, which is translating content. Okay, so here we go. Here's a little demo I set up a while back, and it uses our Zapier integration. So this is my Zap, and let's just actually go back out of here. So this is I call this my Agility post tweeter. So this is actually going to tweet anytime something gets posted. Okay, so I've got lots of Zaps that I've written in here. One of the cases I talked about was translating content. This one's slightly simpler version of that I can show. So our Agility Zapier integration allows you to basically get events from Agility. So what this is actually doing is creating a webhook in the background for you using Zapier, and so it creates that webhook for you and hooks it up and fires your zaps whenever that content event changes. So it's like a totally no code way of doing this. And I wanted to see if I could, this was just me testing stuff out. Hey, can I actually, send a tweet every time something changes in my instance? Okay. And so what this does is it actually, gets my event, which is going to be a publish from Agility. It uses Zapier's storage thing to say, hey, have I sent a tweet out for this content ID yet? So I'm going to actually store the content ID and check to see if it's already there. Only process ones that already are in there or already have not been processed. I'm going to go fetch that post. So I'm going to go download the entire post that was just saved, that was in there. So this uses, again, the fetch API. I'll jump into the edit version of this in a second to see how that works. And then Zapier itself has a connection to Twitter. So I'm going to go create a tweet, and it tweets it on my account from there, and puts a link to it and creates that message based on the fields that are pulling back from my fetching of that post. Pretty cool. And then we're done. And we actually save this into Zapier's storage mechanism so that we can only tweet each piece of content once. I don't want to, if you do multiple publishes on like a blog post or something, I don't want to continually be tweeting that. That was my logic. Okay. I've got another one. Let's edit this Zap for a second. Let's actually show this. So we're going to edit the draft. So when I created this, like, this is an actual publish event from Agility that comes in, and I've got this hooked up to my account. Okay, so this account is like, it's using this version of it, and when you, basically you can see I've hooked it up to this instance GUID. Okay, so it's going to basically take stuff from this instance. That's how that works, right? When we test it at the trigger. So pretty cool. Let's actually run this thing and see if it works. I haven't run this in a long time. So let's go. It's turned on. So let's look at the history of it. Okay, hasn't run for a while. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to this instance, which I think is here, and I'm going to go and I'm going to publish a new post. All right. This is live demo test. Author John Appleseed. This is content. Do I need an image? I think I need an image. No, I don't need one, but I'll put one in anyway. Okay. All right. Save this thing. And then I'm going to publish it. Hopefully it works. I haven't tested this Zap in a long time. So testing your Zaps is always super important. So it's published. Let's see if that ran. I'm going to refresh. Oh, it did run. There it goes. It's running right now. This is exciting. Okay. It ran through and it's successful, and it should have tweeted. Let's go ahead and check my Twitter. I'm in twitter.com/Joel Vardy. The tweet. Oh my gosh. Put the photo in and everything. Woo. So there you go. Webhooks at work. That's pretty cool. Pretty neat. I'm going to delete this tweet because it's really not the kind of tweet that I want to send out, although I'm really excited about this tweet. Okay, so let's look at one more. That's pretty cool. Let's look at the same kind of a thing, but in this one, I didn't use the Agility API. I actually just created a translation utility, and it used more of the standard, like, create the webhook manually. Okay, so you can do a trigger event, a webhook trigger event from Zapier that gives you a specific URL that you then would take this and copy and paste this into Agility. So the Agility integration is like, takes care of all that for you and creates the webhook manually when you hook that up. In this case, I've done the whole thing manually, using, like, as if the integration didn't exist. So it's like going through the steps manually. Copy and paste that in. We're going to parse that hook that comes back, check if it's a post, fetch the item from English, see if it's available in French. If it is available in French, I'm going to translate the title, then the content. So like Zapier actually has these little translation activities, and then save it back into Agility, and then send a message in Slack. Okay, so it's pretty cool that I can do all of this stuff. I didn't have to write any code. I needed to know what I can do using Agility. So I'd say if you want to get started at this, jump on our Slack. I'll help you get started on this personally, because I think it's really fun, or one of our team will help you get going on this with Zapier, because it's really cool to see this working. Zapier works really well. You don't have to use Zapier though. You could use Logic Apps if you wanted to do this same thing. There's like all kinds of other like online workflow processing engines that do stuff. Zapier is just one that I really like. It's free to get started with, and you can do some stuff with it. So there you go. That's pretty cool. There was one thing I wanted to show if I had time, and that's how do you get user-generated content to work? It's not with Agility webhooks, but how do you do that? So let's jump into the new UI for a second. So anywhere from the old UI or the classic UI, you can click try the new look and jump in. So this is the exact same form that I was on, and this is it in the new UI. I really hope you like it. If you have thoughts about the new UI, click the feedback button and rate your experience. I'm going to rate this experience as very satisfied. I love it. Right? And I'm going to click submit. Well, how did we do that? How did we save that? I'll have to say, we didn't want to write a whole lot of code for the feedback stuff. We wanted it to be very simple, and we wanted it to be able to be very dynamic. So we used a tool called in Azure, because Agility is hosted 100% in Azure. We used a logic app. So I'm going to jump in. I don't normally show the back end of our Azure portal that often, and it's going slow too. Here we go. Let's look at logic apps. And let's look at the feedback logic app. So what we did is we basically just fired this logic app, and let's go in and edit it. So logic apps also gives you a webhook endpoint. Okay, if you hook this up to an Agility endpoint, then it would fire this logic app, but that would only tell you when content changes. It's not going to tell you when someone filled out a form on your website, right? In this case, the website was the Agility CMS UI itself. So what we actually have is there's code in this feedbacks behind the submit button that takes a JSON object from the form fields that are here and sends them to this webhook. Okay, and it goes through, and then it posts basically creates a Jira ticket. So we track all the feedback through a Jira ticket, and then it posts a message to Slack. Logic apps has lots of connectors. This is very similar to something like a Zapier, right? So really, webhooks are the idea we're going to trigger some kind of workflow action that does something, some kind of thing on the internet. That could be your code, it could be Zapier, it could be DevOps, it could be a logic app, it could be anything. So wherever you kind of already have your code or what you're doing, you can put it in there. So if you're in Azure, that works. I believe there's a similar tool for that's less sort of back-endy called like Power Apps for Microsoft. There's Zapier if you're not into the Microsoft ecosystem, and all kinds of stuff you can do with those. Again, or you could write your own code if you're running on something like Vercel or Netlify, or if you just have a Next.js site or even an ASP.NET site, you can run an Azure function or a serverless function of some kind to run logic that happens. Okay, so webhooks, super powerful, super useful, triggered right from Agility, and thanks for coming to my webinar. No one has put any comments in here about questions, but if you do have questions, please join our Slack channel. It's fun in there. People are super friendly. You may get an answer from one of the Agility team, of which I think we've got Dakota. Hi, Dakota, member of our product team. Congrats on the rollout yesterday. You're doing a great job. And Harmony, congrats to you for starting this webinar, but also for promoting the new UI so much. Appreciate you guys. But for any of the rest of the folks, jump onto our Slack channel. That's a great way to stay connected to us. That's it for today. If there's no other questions, then I'll sign off, and I'll see you next time. This has been great. Thanks for joining, and keep having fun out there.